So I was sitting around the other day asking myself, what's it really going to be like if there was an SHTF? Like the real SHTF, not just a temporary, uh, you know, I can't get toilet paper at the store. A real SHTF where the system really starts to break down. Now, the biggest thing right off the bat is the things that stackers think about. Stackers, not stacker preppers, not preppers, just stackers, is really the financial system, right? Oh, the big brother's finally going to come down. Gold and silver are going to return. Okay, I get that part. I get where they're coming from. I get why they kind of, not that they want to have it to happen, but, they want to be prepared and they want to hedge their bets on that stuff. Now, again, my personal opinion on that is there are plenty in the stacking community that would love to see that kind of thing happen to say I was right. Now, the other part of it that I was kind of walking myself through is if society started to break down. Now, preppers, right off the bat, again, preppers are going to be the ones that gave themselves flexibility by having the means, weapons, food stores, specific tools like water purifiers or generators or whatever, those kind of things to survive, whether it's completely off the grid or whether to turn an impossible situation into something that's manageable. But then I took it a step further and said, okay, let's say the first days, weeks, you have food, you have shelter, you have let's say, for example, you're one of those more extreme preppers where you really have, real solid food stores. And let's say it's supply of clean water, fortified shelter of some kind. You're definitely going to be the exception. But even then, really, the things that are going to be in demand for even someone like you are things that are not going to be something that you can really have on the front end. Now, what do I mean? Well, first off, healthcare. You can be, the greatest prepper ever and have, all your bases covered. But if something really happens, unless you have a physician right up in the house, in, your shelter, if something happens, you're going to need someone who does know what they're doing, what they're talking about, those kind of things. How are you going to seek it out if you took yourself off the grid? If you made it so that no one could find you and no one, knows where you are? Well, you're not. You're going to have to come out and seek that out. Not only that, but you're going to have something, to trade for that knowledge and that time or whatever. Again, something that's going to be very difficult. And it's also something you really can't plan for. I mean, the other part that I was thinking about really with context of the SHTF is how the world has changed in the last few decades. The amount of information that people have at their fingertips, in a good way and in a bad, is pretty boundless. I mean, realistically, like when I think about things like, I have a career obviously, but I'm like, with the amount of information that we have now, I've always had a knack for like healthcare and things like that and understanding like physiology and medicines and blah, 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 things like that. And, different people have said, you should have pursued, medicine, blah, blah, blah. I never was interested in doing it as a career. I just am fascinated by it for different reasons. But anyway, what I was thinking to myself is, there are probably a lot of people who could, for better or for worse, kind of, understand the mechanisms and at least kind of help other people if we were in an SHTF scenario. More beyond first aid, that kind of thing. But what was interesting to me was when I thought about it and I asked myself, what are you really going to be looking for in an SHTF that, is not something that people would think about readily? What came to me is that, hey, first and foremost, the vast majority of information these days is digital in one fashion or another, whether it's literally, internet-based, information, or whether, I mean, even if you went back a few decades and it's on a disk or it's on some type of electronic mechanism, if you can't access that, you're screwed. Okay, well then what's the alternative? Books on everything, how to do things, how to, everything, is going to be in some type of physical medium. Books are going to be something that's completely lost art, especially on the, newer generations. Once you get through college, who reads books? I mean, I personally like books because, I'm a Clancy fan. I'm a, fan of different authors, but the physical book itself it's kind of going by the way of the dinosaur. But in an SHTF scenario, it's going to be worth its weight in gold. That's basically going to be lost knowledge. That kind of thing too is interesting to me, because when I think about, the world that we live in, part of me thinks that at some point something like this may have happened. Where's Grandpa Fish? Grandpa Fish, if you're listening, go ahead and tune out, because I'm going to go down conspiracy row right now. But part of me thinks that somewhere in our history, we probably were some type of an advanced civilization somewhere here on Earth. When, where, how, I don't know. But, when you look back at different things, down the line, it seems like, there were really, really advanced civilizations, and they just kind of went by the wayside for one reason or another. But what God came to me is that all of those civilizations who were, however advanced and for whatever reason, they never really left much behind as far as like what happened, what befell them, where did they go. And I think, that could very easily happen to us, because once we lose that physical medium of, hey, a book, something written, or even books, I mean, obviously they're going to wear and degrade over time. But I mean, 1,000 years pass, and everything that we've built, for the most part, much of it just kind of would go away and weather and just be gone. So a few thousand years later, there's really not much left to say what we were and, what we accomplished and things like that. It's pretty crazy to think about. But that amount of knowledge being in something as simple as books, I mean, in SHTF, it, again, could save your life. It could save your family. Another thing that came to me when I was thinking through the SHTF is that if it really was the kind of doomsday scenario, you'd basically have to pick, even for your own family and things like that, like who lives and who dies. I mean, for lack of a better way of describing it, that's the road you'd have to go down, because all the people you care about, you can't tell them what you have and how prepared you are and blah, blah, blah. You just can't. You can't do any of that. And so, okay, if I can't do any of that, where do I go from there? What do I do? That's a very tough thing to contemplate. You're really going to have to pick who are the winners and who are the losers. Is that really again, it would be a reality, but it's something that you have to plan for. Like, who really is going to be that tight-knit circle that I have limited resources. I can't tell everyone what I have and what I've, done to prepare, because again, all it takes is one person to shoot their mouth off, or, have their own reason for double crossing you, and all that work goes right out the window. You've sacrificed even the people that you're, let's say, your immediate family. Crazy stuff. Where, when I'm thinking about all of these things, I think about it and I laugh to myself that this kind of stuff is the thing that people think about with SHTF. I need it as an insurance policy. And it's like, really? Is this going to be an insurance policy for SHTF? Probably not. It's one more tool in the toolbox, but I mean, realistically, with all the other things going on, super limited utility. Sounds great, it has a great story. When I first got into stacking, and I would watch the things from Kitco where they would trot out the old timers talking about gold should be worth this and silver should be worth this, and then of course YouTube, once you go down the YouTube algorithm, it started recommending like Mike Maloney, and back at 3,000 years ago, gold and silver were the blah blah blah. And I was like, okay, it's interesting, I like history, I love listening to it, let me, it's great. But I think, once you are at that point where it's just like you're just falling down the rabbit hole of confirmation bias, everything you're being told is everything you always want to hear, you forget that there's just so much more to it, so much more that you can't even fathom, what it would entail. And those are the things that really make it, what it's going to be. Definitely food for thought.